Alright guys, so this is episode 4, which will be about multiplying fractions. So on this episode, you will learn how to multiply fractions and how to multiply mixed numbers. So the way that we can model multiplication of fractions is by using an area model. So you can use an area model to find the product of two fractions. So if we think about the problem 1/4 times 3/5, when we're multiplying, we can also think of this problem as 1/4 of 3/5. So if we think about 1/4 of 3/5 using this area model, looking here we see a picture which is divided into 5 sections with each piece representing 1/5. Now if we think previously to the question that we're asked, it's 1/4 of 3/5. So if we shade 3 pieces, that represents 3/5. So if we want to find out 1/4 of 3/5, we can divide the square into 4 sections vertically, representing 1/4. So if we look at this picture, you'll now notice that there are 20 pieces, each representing 1/20th of the square. So if we want to find 1/4 of 3/5, we look at the red rectangle, which represents 1/4, and we look at what overlaps. So what overlaps are 3 pieces representing 3/20ths. Oops, that says 30, that should be a 20, representing 3/20ths. So 1/4 of 3/5, or 1/4 times 3/5 equals 3/20ths. So let's think about another example using an area model. So if we look at this picture, we want to do the reverse and figure out what problem was solved on this area model. So I want you to think about how many pieces this rectangle is divided into, and then think about vertically and horizontally how many sections you see. So if we look horizontally, we realize that it is divided into 4 pieces representing 1/4 each. Then if we look vertically, we see that there are 5 columns representing 1/5 each. So if we look at how much is shaded, we see that 1/4 is shaded and 1/5 is shaded. The way that this is now divided up is into 20 pieces, each representing 1/20th. If we look at this picture, the area that overlaps is 1 piece, which represents 1/20th. So the problem that was solved using that area model was 1/5 times 1/4, or 1/5 of 1/4, which represents 1/20th. So what's nice is that we don't need to draw a picture for each problem. We have a key point that is going to tell us how to multiply any fractions. So the product of 2 fractions is equal to the product of the numerators over, or divided by, the product of the denominators. So in this example, we have 3/5 times 4/7. So we multiply the numerators 3 times 4, which is 12. At the denominator, 5 times 7, which is 35. We don't need to simplify this fraction because it already is simplified, because 12 and 35 don't have any common factors. So here is our next example. So we have 7/10 times -4 over 21. So if we want to solve this, we want to multiply the numerators and the denominators. So what I did is I stuck the negative with the 4. You could also stick the negative with the 21, but I just chose to keep it with the 4. So if I do 7 times -4 and 10 times 21, I now have a fraction of -28 over 210. Or if you put the negative with the 21, you'd have 28 over -210. So now we need to think, is that simplified? Well, I noticed that both numbers are even, so since they're both even, I know that 2 is going to go into both of those. So if I divide 28 by 2 and 210 by 2, I'm left with -14 over 105. So many of you would probably circle this and say that's my final answer. However, it can be simplified further. Can anyone think of how it can be simplified further? Well, both 14 and 105 are divisible by 7. So, if I divide negative 14 by 7 and 105 by 7, I am left with negative 2/15. Now, that is my simplest answer because 2 and 15 do not have any common factors. So, now we're going to talk about multiplying mixed numbers. It's really similar to multiplying with fractions. So when you have two mixed numbers, so for example, negative 2 and 3/4 times 3 and 1/5, your first step is always going to be to change the mixed numbers to improper fractions. And I'm going to explain later why not changing them would give you the wrong answer. So we have to change these mixed numbers to improper fractions. So, if we want to change negative 2 and 3/4 to an improper fraction, I'm going to do 4 times negative 2, which is negative 8, and then add 3 to get negative 11 over 4. Doing the same with 3 and 1/5, 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 gives me 16. So now I have 16/5. So my new problem is a negative 11/4 times 6 over 5. So now I can just simply multiply my numerators and my denominators. So when I do negative 11 times 16, or remember I could stick my negative with 4 as well, but I'm going to keep it with my numerator. And then I'm going to do 4 times 5 on my denominator. So negative 11 times 16 is negative 176. 4 times 5 is 20. So then we think, is this simplified? Well, same as the previous example, both of those numbers are even, so I know that 2 is going to go into both of these numbers. So, when I simplify, I will get negative 88 over 10. They are both still even, so I know that 2 will go into both. So my simplest form will be negative 44/5, or I can write it as a mixed number of negative 8 and 4/5. Either way is simplified, just written in different forms. So, what if we didn't change these to improper fractions and just multiplied the whole numbers in the fractions? So if we multiplied negative 2 times 3, we would get negative 6. And then if we do 3/4 times 1/5, we'll get 3/20. So combining those, we'll get negative 6 and 3/20. However, on the previous page, we got negative 8 and 4/5. These are not equivalent, right? These are not the same mixed number, so that means that we have to always change our mixed numbers to improper fractions. All right, see y'all Monday.